Really, I'm can't express my feelings that I am coming back live, although after a very short break, because throughout during the lockdown I have been fully staying connected with all of you. Unfortunately, I could not be in touch of late, maybe for 10 days. So we have this webinar today, which is part of the musculoskeletal manual medicine and therapy. I wanted to actually introduce you the physical examination one. Although AOMPT has been providing the webinars on physical examination, yes, and also practical demonstration webinars we have conducted during the lockdown. Plus the video courses are there. There are extensive video courses including anatomy, the pathomechanics, the physical examination regionally, including special tests and movement testing, every examination that is there, with also differential diagnosis regionally, cervical, spine to foot and ankle. Okay, so we have been providing these courses, but still I felt that the concept or the core cream of the physical examination has not reached our therapists. Unfortunate. Okay, so because we are entering into a scenario, the post-COVID now. Remember that hands-on treatments versus hands-off treatments. That means you treat by touching the patient, that is hands-on. You treat or manage the problems without touching the patient, that is hands-off. Okay. So now we are going to get into hands-off at least for this 1 year. Okay, the post-COVID, and with the emergence of the variant of the original COVID-19 and also the bird flu. So there are a lot of aspects to get into the healthcare. Okay, it's going to get modified, and we healthcare professionals, it's our moral obligation that we cannot stop treatments. So the same way, you should see that how well you can diagnose without putting the patient in more into a physical testing. Okay, you should not make the patient to do more movements, more activities, then you diagnose. Okay, we need to diagnose by interaction. This is the present necessity. What is the past implication? Okay, how when the profession of physiotherapy has developed, okay, we are also proud to tell that physical therapists spend more time with the patient. Okay, and the physicians and the medical, the mainstream modern medicine, the healthcare has transformed now. Previously, the reliance on the investigations or the procedures were very less because technologically those were not available. So physicians used to be family medicine practitioners. So that means people used to tell that he is my family doctor. Okay, family doctor. So that means by generation, doctors also generation by generation, the family members also generation by generation. So you keep consulting the same doctor. The doctor actually speaks to you more than writing or sending you for the labs. And at the end of it, he gives a medicine from a very small bottle, which is already opened, okay, or it is samples given by the pharmaceutical companies, and the doctor actually gives that, telling that you don't have such a big problem, nothing. Okay, so you just take this, you will be fine in 2 to 3 days. Or if it is uncertain, they tell you just take these tablets for 2 to 3 days, come back to me, just we'll see how well you progress. Okay, so that's what they say. And patients used to feel very comfortable, very safe, and you see crowds of patients standing in very small clinic in the roadside like a shop. Okay, clinics, not many were attached to the hospitals or big stream polyclinics. Okay, so nowadays if a patient goes telling that I have headache, okay, what has happened now, the medicine education, the MBBS has become MD one side, another side MS. MD, always they think about multiple systemic problems. Okay, and surgeon always thinks indication for surgery. Okay, so patient is stuck between these two, MD and MS. Usually MS they don't visit first. Okay, unless they have taken surgery, or they are thinking about surgery, or they are going about a second opinion for surgery, then only they go to an MS. Okay, and coming to the super specializations, DM. Okay, very difficult now that there is a direct access for DM. Okay, very few people are practicing directly. Otherwise, if you see, it's always through a referral chain. Okay, So MD and DM, that is one channel. Another one is MS and MCH. Okay, that is a super specialization of surgery. MCHs. So that is also another aspect that they look only into the technicalities of the surgical procedure. Okay, because they are experts in the surgical approach, technique, and precision. So their competency. So as they become more specialized, what has happened is the common cold, okay, or a fever, for example, which was simply treated earlier using maybe generic medicines or maybe the branded medicines which were samples or something like that. It was non-commercial much, okay. But the doctors used to get a minimum consultation fee, 10 rupees or 20 rupees, but they'll get 200 patients in a day. Okay, so you'll see the maximum crowd. And once in a while, if the doctor actually tells that with a smile, okay, telling that, hey, don't worry, you are a young boy, nothing wrong, you are fine, okay, patient feels, wow, okay. And this is the one which actually creates the safest healthcare environment. Okay, I want to emphasize this. We are not cheating the patient, but remember that, are we helping the patient by panicking? By telling that when a patient comes to us, I re-quote the words of Dr. B.M. Egde. Okay, he has given a lot of lectures in YouTube. When the patient comes to us, headache, immediately we say that, okay, did you have any fall? And they'll think, oh, that means if I have headache means I should have had a fall. Okay, and then the second thing, did you have loss of consciousness? Oh, I'm supposed to be unconscious. So fall, unconscious. Okay. And then the next question you ask is anybody else came with you? Gone, the patient is, oh, I think I am going to die. Okay, this is what the impression we are creating to a patient. Okay, are you actually treating? I don't think so. When you begin like this, okay, you should tell that patient clearly. Okay, be very as a human being. Okay, you are also a human being. They are also human being. So you are talking to another human being. You are not talking to a specimen with a disease, okay, which you have to test. You are talking to a person who is having a suffering, okay, and they trusted you that you are the one who can provide the solution to that suffering. So are you actually beginning in that manner? What is the other example? First ask them, okay, are you now fine? Okay, is it too much? You want to lie down? Imagine the reaction, okay, the empathy. So because sitting, is it okay for you? Okay, because you can lie down. No, then we can talk even when you are lying down. There is nothing like you have to be sitting in front of me in the table. So it shows that the approachability, the empathy, everything. So it opens up the patient. Okay, and the next thing what you do is ask about general things. Okay, like for example, where are you staying? Okay, how far are you from the clinic? Okay, and what is your mother tongue? Okay, we always use the mother, we never ask father tongue, but you can always ask, okay, which is a language which you are comfortable with. Okay, and try to see that explore about the general things which they'll be comfortable to talk. Okay, and if they were waiting for a long time, you know that the receptionist has told you that patient was waiting. Start with a very friendly, what is called as a apology. It's not a formal apology, but just as a friendly apology that, you know, you're waiting for half an hour, do you wish to have a tea or a coffee? Okay, just like that. Okay, it's something. Anyway, you can talk and you can do the history taking, especially when the patient is just informally with you as interacting. They should feel that I'm talking to another human being, okay, who's going to take care of me like a human being, okay, not like a guinea pig. Okay, so the next thing, of course, of this opening, okay, this is the initial one, because you want the patient to be opened up. Why? Because they travel from doctor to doctor, what is called as doctor shopping, and they have told the history sometimes to some people who have listened in. Other people have asked the serious questions, threatening questions, so they stopped telling things to the doctor, and they end up like afterwards telling that, please read my file. Whenever you ask anything, they will tell, everything is mentioned in this file. Okay, so they get frustrated. Don't blame the patient that why the patient is doing like this. Okay, you don't become aggressive in replying that I don't treat the file, I treat the patient. Okay, I am asking you, you tell, I don't want to read what another doctor has written. Don't talk like this. Okay, it is just their expression. Dedicate some time, 30 seconds. What is going to happen? Just look at the file. You may not see anything in the file, but still you look at, the patient will feel that I am giving something, the doctor is giving the importance. Okay, so this is what makes them to be very relaxed, very cooperative. Okay, because to get a history which is in the past, for example in a chronic problem so many years back, they need to have a best memory. The best of the long-term memory comes only when you are at the happiest state of mind. Okay, at least if you are not happy, at least you should be relaxed. Okay, so please ensure this, the first two steps in the history taking, and understand the patient's perspective first, and dedicate maybe 2-3 minutes. Okay, and whenever you say anything, you want to ask anything, you want to lead that in the history taking, always talk with no, I'm interrupting you. Okay, so I just want, I'm just curious to find out what is this. Okay, so something like that you ask. Okay, so that they will feel that we are actually having a conversation rather than having a medical process or a procedure. Okay, so he's interviewing to select me whether I am diseased, or he's going to reject me if I am not having the disease. Okay, or he's going to select me because he is going to treat me in his expertise, or he is going to reject me because I am not fitting into his expertise. Okay, so that's the case. It becomes like an interview. Okay? And interview candidates, how they become anxious and they become restless, so, and they start pretending. Okay, so make sure that you let them be normal. You also you develop these qualities. Maybe initially you might do it very consciously, but I believe definitely if you practice anything for 3 weeks, okay, human brain will register it, neuroplasticity, and it will become automatic for you. Just 3 weeks. Okay, because we have to revive the modern medicine, and physical therapists are the best to do that, because I believe we are the one professions who are when the patient enters, we actually get up and receive them. Okay, I always seen that. And we sometimes make the patient sit on the plinth and the therapist is standing. Okay, so here's the profession where history taking, the patient is sitting and the therapist is standing. Okay, so the doctor is standing here in physiotherapy. So that's the biggest difference. Okay, and not only that, we spend more time with the patient, we spend more value. Okay, we make more value of that interaction with the patient, because that's more important. It's not that you spend 2 hours so you become a good clinician, you took a in-depth history. No, what you need is actually the history, which is important for the diagnosis. It is important for ruling out the other picture. Okay, so there are some specific points in history taking which you remember that first and foremost, and how we are actually going through. Okay, so open up with the demographic information, a general one. Okay, and make a lighter conversation so that they get more free. Once that happens, then the steps come. Okay, what are the steps? First and foremost, rule out non-organic symptoms. So non-organic means something to do with the psychosocial. So patient feels that panic, okay, exaggeration, catastrophizing, okay, fear avoidance. So lot of psychological attributes they have given to that. Okay, they think that their problem is cancer, for example. Okay, and they are afraid. So anything can come, or because of sleep disturbances, because of the symptoms they have depression, or they have anxiety because the exam is coming up and still they are having neck pain, for example, young student. Usually the students are anxious because they don't study anything throughout the year. Okay, in the end of the year they suddenly start studying. That's why neck pain comes. Okay, daily if they are studying, it will be conditioned. Okay, but you need to understand that influences psychosocial aspects. Psychological comes to the mental framework, whereas social comes to the community, the environment, all these factors influencing the symptoms. So this can be ruled out just by observing the patient, and eye contact, for example, facial expressions. Okay, how they talk. When a patient tells that I have severe neck pains, I have severe shoulder pain. Okay, and afterwards they are telling that no, my wife is not having shoulder pain, face is normal. Okay, and then afterwards they tell, but whenever I move the arm, too much of pain. Okay, whenever they talk about shoulder, the facial expression comes. Otherwise the facial expression is normal. Okay, the exaggerated expression comes the moment you are talking about the region or the symptom. Okay, in biological terminology. So then you know that they are having a kind of an associated psychosocial attention seeking or exaggerating the symptom response, okay, from their side. Okay, this can happen in normal musculoskeletal disorders, or it can happen as separately like a psychosomatic disorders. What is psychosomatic? We start with the brain and then it manifests in the body. Okay. What are the other normal psychosocial affective ones? Cognitive affective mechanism is you have a shoulder symptom, and because of shoulder symptom you got, keeping on feeling, that I'm getting worse, I don't know what to do. Okay. So all this thoughts process keeping on reflecting again and again, and later you develop a anxiety, depression and restlessness because of these disorders. Okay. So it can be, that is called as bottom up. Okay. Psychosocial cognitive affective mechanism. Top to bottom is non-organic, which is the psychosomatic. Okay. For the top to bottom, the treatment starts with the mind. For the bottom to up, remember that you are treating the mind just to open up, but after that you have to treat the body. Okay. For psychosomatic also body is affected, so you need to treat the body, but remember that both have to be treated. But the focus, whether you are going to use cognitive or affective techniques more. Cognitive means understanding, affective means the emotional aspects. Okay. So whether you are going to address these two aspects more, or you are going to treat the biological aspects more. Okay. So that is what matters in your differentiation there, the first level. Okay. The next level, you come to the differentiation when you are talking about what is called as the serious pathologies. Because not all physicians or practitioners are expertise in a particular treatments or particular disease conditions or particular stage of a disorder, for example. We might treat a low back pain who's having intermittent low back pain which is coming with activities. We are not used to treating low back pain who's having excruciating pain, night pain, low back pain. And low back pain, whenever low back pain comes, the patient gets fever, for example. You'll be thinking, no, this is not fitting into the picture. So there you come into the factor of screening for red flags. Okay. So first and foremost, screening for the non-organic symptoms, the psychological, okay, bottom up and the top down, okay, both the differentiations. The next one comes to the red flags. Red flags literally means that it's a stop signal, the red, and you are going to refer the patient to another. But from your side, what best you can do, you can definitely do. You can give advice, okay, hands-off treatments, as much as you know. If the patient is not going to go to another consultant also, still you should ensure that the patient's symptoms are being monitored by the patient. Okay, improve an awareness of the condition. Okay, so try to give a bit of an education, explain them about this problem, and you just charge the same fee. And if the patient is of not of an affordable category, you give it for free, no problem. Okay, 10 patients free among 100, nothing is going to happen. Okay, you have got knowledge for free, so you can give your skill also for free. Okay, remember that the best of the billionaires, always they have a allocation for the charity. Okay, so they donate more money comes. Okay, so remember this, you donate knowledge, more knowledge comes easily. Okay, you may not donate fully, you cannot donate, nobody can do that, but at least make sure that you do it. When you do good service, automatically his service multiplies. Okay, so remember that these things are very, very important. The moral values, which is a core value of professionalism, which is very important in healthcare, and unfortunately these are not aspects which are actually taught in the institutions. Okay, I will tell you one thing, nobody teaches how to take a good history taking, okay, in physical therapy, for example. At least as a physical therapist professor for 20 years, I am, I feel that as a student I miss that. Okay, but remember that those who are watching this video, please emphasize this aspect and try to see, when we are screening for red flags, do not panic. Okay, do not create that panic in the patient by, for example, if I start asking that did you have any weight loss more than 5 kg in the last 1 month, they'll start getting afraid. Oh, why are you asking about weight loss? The same thing you can ask, how is your body weight, is it okay? General question. Okay, so See the difference between these two. One direction you are actually, going for abnormalities. Other direction you are concentrating on the patient, how he is feeling about the weight. That's what you want to know actually. Okay. If the patient tells that, my weight is it's fine, but sometimes I feel sometimes it goes less. Okay. Then you ask, okay, how much it has gone less. Just like whenever the weight was getting less, before or after that, did you feel any kind of difference with your back pain? Okay. So something like that, try to relate that. They tell that, no, I have not noticed, doctor. Okay, so they might tell that. It's fine. If you want to relate with the obesity with the low back pain, so make sure that, that thing comes. The patient is obese. You know that from the appearance. Ectomorphic, endomorphic or mesomorphic. Okay, endomorphic is obese. So you need to, you have a, predisposition that may be obese, that's why the patient is having low back pain, for example. So that means also, make sure that instead of asking that how long is your back pain severe, the patient tells that for last 3 weeks I am having too much of back pain. Immediately don't jump into the question of have you put on weight in the past 3 months? Okay. So that's the worst question that you can ask to a patient who is obese. Okay. So remember that because already they have an altered body image, and you are actually, they themselves are generally, people would have told that because you are overweight only, this back pain is, so you reduce the weight, you will become normal. Okay, so they will tell like that. So they have come to you for some help. So make sure that you find out the problem without creating the panic attitude in them. Okay. So red flags, most of the screening questions involve something similar to this: weight loss or fever or lack of appetite. Okay, don't feel like eating anything. Malaise, when you get up in the morning, you don't feel like going ahead with the day. Okay, you just want to keep lying down. It might happen. The lockdown effect can happen, and so that's something. Working from home, flexibility. A lot of things have changed here now post COVID. 1 year before, everything was totally different. The same time last year was totally different. Okay, and so make sure that malaise is the general attitude of that laziness. Okay, that unwillingness to do any activities, anything. Okay, so that kind of, it's not psychological, it's more physical. Okay, and you also have what is called as the symptoms which is coming in the night. Okay, symptoms which are coming unpredictably. Okay, patient is not able to tell like I was doing this, then the problem came, I felt that stiff sensation after doing the bending activity, something. They are not able to relate to anything, and so that kind of a picture also will give a direction that it might be a red flag. Okay, when more factors are present together, then you can suspect a high probability of red flags. So in the situation when you find that it might be red flags, what is your next step? What you will do is, of course, make sure that you are going to be transparent. Okay, just tell them that, have you taken any paracetamol? Have you taken any kind of medicines you have taken, or have you applied anything on your body just to make yourself strong? Okay, so ask them like a like a peer, like a friend. Just find out what were the solutions they took for that. Okay, they have a weight loss. Did they do anything? Did they drink any kind of magic powder? Okay, which will give them weight, or they had a weight gain, so they had another magic powder. The same magic powder, for example, because some of them propagate that this magic powder you take in the morning, you will put on your protein and then weight will increase. And if you have it in the night with hot water, morning with milk means you will put on weight. Night with hot water means you will lose the weight. Okay, same powder. So there are a lot of things which are products which are commercially distributed, including even the healthcare delivery has become commercial. Okay, so you need to be very, very aware of these kind of things as a patient and also as a healthcare provider. Don't use these kind of things. This is unethical, immoral, and you can't do this as a human being to another human being. Okay, so please, business you don't do with the body, human body. Okay, so that's something which is inexcusable. Okay, so something like that. And red flags, yes, fine. So you tell them that it is your scope of practice. Okay, you can't prescribe. There are options to have medications, there are options to have injections, there are options to have any advanced procedures like that, so that will be better help, okay, for the problem. It might be requiring some testing. For that testing you may not be the best person to prescribe, okay, and then ask them that do you have anyone whom you know, generally doctor whom you have consulted actually and you have come, or any other physician whom you know, just ask them. So don't jump into the factor that I know Dr. XYZ, he is the expert, so go to him. It's obvious that you are referring because of a channel of cutting and commissions, okay. So remember, don't create that impression, okay, referring them to the lab. You just tell them, do you know any lab you want to go for and test means you can go. So something like that. Get to feel that, and they will tell that, no doctor, no. Do you know anyone? If you know, you tell, I will go there. Okay, that's the build of trust which you have gained. Okay, you don't have to earn money, earn goodwill. Because money anyone can earn. This is not an achievement at all. Okay, and anyone can lose it also. Goodwill, you can never lose it. Okay, whatever happens, your goodwill always stays with you. Okay, so remember, build that and earn that. Okay, the patient will definitely have that, because every human being has a side inside. Okay, the moral values side. You just have to awaken that. We'll have a better world, better healthcare. So from that perspective, once you have screened for the first one, which is the non-organic, the next one which is the red flag, of course the next one comes to the, in the mechanical or musculoskeletal disorders, there are two types. One which is mechanical and non-mechanical. So what do we tell about the mechanical versus non-mechanical in history? Okay, mechanical means it's not to do with the physics, but remember, you can derive the meaning from physics. Mechanics includes statics and dynamics. What is the statics for the human body? Sitting posture. What is the dynamics for the human body? Movements. Okay, so those are the dynamics. Walking is a dynamics. So something like that. Functional activities, all which involve movements, are dynamics, which involve standing, sitting, lying down, or bending forward, or reaching forward. Okay, that's a static. Okay, so these two are altering the symptoms. That means it's a mechanical disorder. Symptoms, very simple. Intermittent symptoms also indicate that it's a mechanical disorder. That means it's not present 24 hours throughout the day. It's present more in the morning. It may be degeneration. Okay, more towards the afternoon, end of the day. It's a overuse disorder, primarily muscular. Okay, mornings it's primarily articular. Okay, when early morning stiffness or pain. Okay, and when you have night symptoms, remember that the day you had a more exertion, more stress, and there are musculoskeletal disorders like rotator cuff tear, subacromial bursitis in the shoulder, which will present with night pain. In the spine, disc extrusions have night pain. Okay, so because constant pain can be there throughout the day, they might have mild pain throughout the day, and it might increase when the stresses are exposed. The stresses like physical stresses, which is like bending forward, lifting a weight, okay, or coughing, sneezing, okay, it's related to the intradiscal pressure. Okay, so you can see that there is a relationship between the activities and the symptom. Okay, some activities are increasing the symptoms, some activities are reducing the symptoms. All this you can find in the history when the patient is describing themselves. You just have to start the conversation. Okay, don't lead the conversation, don't try to conclude the conversation. For example, if I am asking that for the headache itself, in a musculoskeletal perspective, I will be more concerned about the cervicogenic headache, the headache originating from the neck, from the cervical spine. So you have muscles, you have the joints in the spine, here also it can refer the headache, and you have the nerves which are going to the head, so they can get compressed and they can create a headache. Okay, so these are all musculoskeletal causes. So of this, I want to get a better picture. Okay, after I have ruled out the red flags, I have and all that non-organic ones step by step, and I made the patient to open up. See, hardly it takes 5 minutes. Don't think that half an hour it will take. If you allow the patient to talk, it will take a longer time. No. Okay. If for example, if you see that they are too much deviating, you know that they are non-organic. Okay, so that's the picture there. Okay, so there you get the clue there, and then you see. And red flags, once it comes, you don't become like anyway we are going to refer to another physician, so why to waste our time? We found that it is a cancer, it might be there, old cancer, maybe again it is coming back. So these are things. Don't try to cut off the relationship with the patient, because what is important is, as an healthcare provider, the patient has come to you with the belief. Okay, so do not break that trust. Okay, make sure that you give the best advice, and you charge the fee accordingly. Okay, you might have an idea that 1 hour I spend means I should charge around 1,000 minimum. Okay, something like that you have kept. It's fine. You charge the same. Okay, so anyway, when the patient comes, most of the clinics, they have the system that first they do the payment, then only they come to us. So it's absolutely fine that you take your time and then listen to the patient. You start the conversation by encouraging the patient to open up. Tell me about your problem. Okay, which problem you want me to actually address? Okay, what do you feel that your body is uncomfortable with, which you would like to get advice from me or management from physiotherapy? Okay, so ask them a general question, let them talk, let them describe, and they might describe about the past doctors, what they were telling, this and that, like that. You just take some tips if there is some kind of a keywords mentioned by anybody, but their words are not going to matter anyway, as I told you, because we don't go by the history that is reported by the past therapists. Okay, we need to take a history. Okay, and internally within an institution, when one therapist has taken the history, other therapist just reads that previous history and see for the missing information. That alone you can take during a follow-up, for example. Okay, so I remember that everything should be documented, because that's important there. So you ask a question which you can document. Don't ask a question which you cannot document. Okay, that means you are not comfortable with documenting, then don't ask that question to the patient. Okay, because it's medico-legally, it's very, very important that you ask only very relevant points. Okay, and permitted by cultural and also ethical boundaries. Okay, so apart from this, you then lead that, okay, to how the progression came, okay, how it started, how it progressed, the problems, and how it behaved, okay, how, as in terms of the daily behavior, or over a period of time how it was behaving, the problem, and then the treatments, of course, what they have taken, in a very, very broad perspective, in a non-scientific perspective. Let the patient tell, and there you complete the present history. Okay, the symptom or the chief complaint which the patient came to you with. Okay, next you go to the past history. So that means you ask one question. Is this the first time that you are having? Okay, do you feel that you never had this problem before? Are you sure that you never had this problem before? Something like this. Why? Because instead of asking that, have you had the problem before? Okay, is it first time or is it repeatedly coming? If you ask like this, they, something like, oh, so this is going to again repeat in future. So that thing will come. So better you ask like, are you sure that this is the first time? Okay, are you sure that you never got it before? Okay, you are saying that whenever they say something that I am having for past 3 months, and then initially I had pain in the neck, now I am having pain in the back. Okay, like that. Then you say that, you again repeat that point. You say that, after they complete the sentence, immediately you tell, okay. So you have this for 3 months, and back pain came just now. So before that, neck pain was there. Okay. Okay. Please continue. Okay. So they believe that, it's right. Okay. He's jotting down in his mind, and he's also verifying the information back with me. Okay. It's a two-way interaction, which is called as listening, active listening. Okay. It's not just the verbal aspect which you are doing active listening, you should do body language also. Okay, you can't be like looking at your laptop or talking to your attender or the nurse in between, and then or you keep looking at your phone, especially nowadays. Okay, it's very very more than the family, the phone has become a headache, okay, for every human being. Okay, so remember that you need to know that how you actually are. If you have a CCTV, okay, the surveillance cameras in your clinic or the consultation rooms, definitely, which you should have. Okay, make sure that you are watching that CCTV at the end of the day. Okay, to see that how you are sitting, okay, when you are talking, when the patient is describing some details of the symptoms, are you really leaning forward and listening to them? Okay, so it shows that the keenness or the curiosity to know that information. Okay, it does not come with pretending or acting, but make sure that when you are serious to listen, automatically it goes. Okay, you will hardly do like this, or like this when somebody is talking something and you are listening seriously. Okay, don't do that. Okay, some people have the habit that eye contact is very difficult for them to maintain, but remember that when you are explaining, look at the patient, and when the patient is talking, you can look at maybe if there are wall hangings, okay, pictures, or you can look at the patient's head, hair, okay, somewhere up. Okay, so don't look down. Okay, whatever gender they are, okay, when they talk, don't look at their shoulder or look at the shirt or something like that. Okay, so although they wear something, a logo for example is there, so don't keep looking there. Okay, so always look something higher up, which always shows that you are thinking. When you are listening, you are also trying to relate it to some kind of an information. It's difficult for eye contact. If you can maintain eye contact, that's the best. Okay, so active listening. Past history, again it's almost similar. You ask them how it progressed, what are the treatments which they have taken in the past, okay, what were the relationships. I would like to emphasize there are 4 terms. One that is called as causative factors, the next one is called as precipitating factors, okay, the next one is contributing factors and aggravating factors. Okay, so I repeat, causative factor means the one which is actually the culprit. Okay, the factor is the one which is responsible for initiating the symptom, initiating the very beginning, the launch of the symptom. That is causative. So never think that sitting causes back pain. Okay, so if you are hypothesizing that sitting is cause for back pain, that means you should ensure that standing never causes back pain. Okay, any other positions never causes back pain, and only when the patient sits, then the back pain starts. Okay, so that is causative factor. Precipitating factor is pain is there, it's mild, but the sitting creates that pain to actually manifest to a higher intensity. Okay, and it precipitates. So it's like it brings it to the out. Okay, otherwise it's hidden. Okay, I might have a tired back, a fatigued back. Okay, and then I sit for 1 hour, then I feel that after that getting up, I feel that severe pain. Okay, so it's precipitating factor. So this is the difference between a causative and a precipitating factor, because the treatments are different. Causative means you know that there is a serious tissue damage associated with that particular position or activity. You might give a modification in the beginning, at least for 3 days to 3 weeks maximum, depending on the extent of the injury. If the injury is muscle injury, 3 days is fine. Injury is ligament or capsule injury, 3 weeks. Bony injury, 3 months. Okay, when it comes to spine. If it is extremities, you might prefer that 6 weeks is fine. Okay, for bony injuries, you suspect like degenerations and even pathological fractures. Okay, so these all things happen. So what you see further when you are seeing for the causative versus the precipitative, we have seen. Aggravating is you already have the symptom of back pain. Okay, and when you are sitting, the pain becomes more. So that means I have a pain of 4 on visual analog scale, 0 to 10 centimeters, where 0 is no pain, 10 is maximum pain possible, visual analog scale. Most of the visual analog scale comes in the subjective examination, which we are going to see in the next webinar. But for history, you just ask them that pain. Do you have pain? When you are sitting, the pain increases more. So that is aggravating factor. It's not a causative factor. Okay. Patient has done bending and lifting weights. After that, the back pain is there. Okay. That means the causative is actually the bending and lifting. After that, sustained forward bending precipitates the back pain. Okay. And prolonged sitting aggravates the back pain. Okay. And next comes contributing factor. So that means contributing factor can be physical, like I have a lordosis which is flattened lordosis, so it can be a contributing factor because sitting time, again the spine is getting strained. Or I have a contributing factor of environmental or ergonomic, like I am in a sitting job, so it keeps on getting exposed, okay, again and again, and it adds on to the actual other causative or the aggravating factors. Okay, so contributing factors, you need not give advice at all. Okay, because it is like the patient will recover and they will get conditioned and they will get hardening. Okay, automatically. Okay, so but if it is causative factor, definitely you have to give the advice in the early stage of management. And next, when you see for aggravating factors, they give a clue about the pathomechanics. Okay, which movements, which activities are aggravating, which is relieving, like that. Okay, so remember that these four could be identified in history as a bit of an indicator, but subjective examination it will be more clearly explored. Okay, and after the present and the past history, of course, the next comes the medical and the surgical history. So asking about the treatments which the patient has taken relevant to this condition, or the next one is other regions of the body also. Okay, and the next you come to personal history, which is most important to do with the what is called as the substance abuse, which not only tell about the psychological status, but also tells about the chronic adaptation that happens in the body because of substance abuse. Okay, so if the patient is a smoker or is alcoholic or their drug abuse, even drug abuse could be taking analgesics, for example, unprescribed analgesics. Okay, and they keep on taking every time, just getting addicted to it. Okay, so that's also it's substance abuse, drug abuse. What's important for us when we ask this about smoking is why do we ask about packs of cigarettes and all those things? Remember, just find out the relationship with symptoms. Okay, don't ask them which brand of cigarette do you smoke. Okay, so don't go into the details, because the more you ask, the more they'll feel like now itself I should smoke. Okay, and they will also hope that the therapist also definitely must be a smoker. Okay, so make sure that you stay within your boundaries and ask them. And automatically these substance abuse people have some psychosocial issues which might be there in all of us. So don't be panicking that you are treating a patient who is sensitive. You need to be also sensitive, okay, emotionally. Okay, so the next, of course, of biological changes in chronic adaptation because of smoking or alcoholism, there is no evidence. Okay, you can't tell that smokers develop peripheral vascular disease, okay, nicotine deposition and lungs, these comes, that comes. Non-smokers are also getting cancer, smokers are also getting cancer. Okay, tobacco chewing, for example, cancer. So that is somehow there is a association is there, risk factor like that. So passive smokers are more dangerous. Okay, they are exposed than the active smokers. So a lot of things are there. Okay, so do not stigmatize. Okay, just see the relationship with symptoms. When they feel better, when they are smoking, they feel better. They are using it as a immediate intervention. So you know that there is something which is to do with the patient's own self-management strategy. Okay, so after the personal history, it's of course the family history. And family history is not just asking about wife, children, and family members and all these things. Most importantly, it is relationship with the symptoms. Okay, family members having similar symptoms in the past, or they have taken any kind of management, long-term management, medical management for symptoms in many regions. Okay, a patient now has only shoulder pain, this patient under consideration, but grandma had multiple joint pain. Okay, is it going to influence us? We cannot say at this point of time, but if this shoulder pain is unresponsive to treatment, or during the course if the patient develops a contralateral shoulder pain, then you know that it's bilateral, so it is coming as a polyarthralgia. Okay, so you explore the other joints examination, there is no pain but there are deformities, then you might do a lab investigation and find out that it's a polyarthropathy. Okay, so these are all about giving get of clues. Okay, if nothing is there, you just tell that not significant, and if you don't have to ask that question at all to the patient, you feel that it's not important, then you put it as not relevant. Okay, so you can put it family history not relevant, you can put it family history not significant. These two are totally different. Okay, not relevant means you are not asking, no need to be asked. Not significant means you asked but there's nothing that could be found. Okay, the next one, of course, you can also write no history of, okay, diabetes mellitus, hypertension, ischemic heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Okay, you can put the conditions, list of conditions, no history of like that, either in family history or in the medical history. You can put that, okay, as the last option after the first two. Okay, whether it is not relevant or not significant, then you put this. Of course, after this, you go to, after the family history is the socio-economic history. Most of the times we are exploring the socio-economic history for, of course, the payment, which is very, very important. It may influence the decisions, okay, patient's affordability to specific interventions. For example, a physical therapist is applying ultrasound therapy versus a high power laser. You might charge differently because, of course, the machine's charge is totally different. Okay, it's almost 20 times more. Okay, so you can expect that charge or fees will be more. So patient, can they afford or not? Okay, so who is paying it? If it's the insurance company that is paying, is patient the primary, what is called as the breadwinner? Okay, the head of the family who's financially responsible, and so this all this find it out. Okay, because every treatment can always be individualized to suit the patient's financial status. Okay, so you can give the, don't reduce the quality of the treatment as much as possible, but make sure that you can do the best with limited intervention rather than with more. However, it's a huge controversy. Okay, what I would suggest as a tip, you know how much you have to charge, give the same treatment, but make sure that you individualize the fee. Okay, so this flexibility you need to have, and you cannot keep asking for salary certificate. You cannot ask for the government of India's, telling that you are below the poverty line. Okay, you need a proof and all that, because all these government documents are also can be easily forged, or it can be bribed and got easily in India at least. Okay, so there's nothing to do with those papers. Okay, you just go by your instinct and by your humanity. Okay, and find out this. And social and economic, you just again relate it with symptoms. So that means like the immediate community which the patient is getting in touch with, be it friends or be it what is called as a peer group whom they meet otherwise. So all of them and their relationship to the symptoms. Okay, so is it affecting their socio-economic interactions? Okay, so these are all important ones which you need to know. And of course, after you have seen the present history, past history, medical, surgical, okay, and personal, family and socio-economic, is next comes the occupational history, which is very, very important in musculoskeletal disorders, because every type of work is influenced by the symptom. Okay, sometimes the work itself would have caused the symptom, as I was telling, causative factor, or work would have precipitated the symptom which was hidden and occult. Okay, so it has precipitated the symptom. Only during work it becomes apparent. Okay, apparent to obvious. Okay, so it becomes, and it could be an aggravating factor. The patient had the pain and then going for work and then the pain becomes more, or it could be a contributing factor, which is pain relieved by treatment. Okay, but going to the work again it comes back. Okay, so it maintains the disorder. Okay, it affects the disorder from recovering. Okay, so that is called as contributing factors. So occupational history with symptoms, again there also you ask, during the work have you got the same shoulder pain, at the end of the work have you felt the shoulder pain, the days when work is too much did you feel the pain in the night. Rather than asking these questions like in this direction, you can ask them that how do you associate that your work is actually troubled or affecting the pain. Okay, work and your shoulder pain, how do you actually interpret, or how do you can you explain, okay, how your work and your pain are related? Do you think that it's related, and then how? Then patient will tell themselves, because work can affect the pain or pain can affect the work. Both directions it's possible. Okay, so then you get the direction, then you try to go that in the subjective examination. Okay, so occupational history. Of course, next is the recreational history. Some of the key findings in occupational history are the compensation, workmen's compensation claims and other things. They are yellow flags, because some of the patients would prefer an extensive treatments, extensive investigation, passive treatment, just because the treatments is billed by the company. Okay, so they pay that. So they will try to avail all the facilities and relax. Okay, take time off work. Okay, they get extensive sick leave benefits, so that's a lot of things. So make sure that you explore that in the occupational history. Recreational history is for keeping the patient's mind occupied. Okay, in cases of especially inpatient rehab, where the patient might require a hospital admission, so they can keep themselves occupied with that hobbies. And also, if the symptom is affecting the hobby, remember, if my back pain is affecting me to teach, it's my occupation. But if my back pain is affecting me to watch movies, so remember, the extent of the disability or the functional limitation is much more. Okay, when it affects the recreational activities, more the concern will be there for the patient. People who tell that I don't have any recreational activity, they are trapped. Okay, they are literally in their own trap of job, work. Okay, every day there should be a periodization between occupation and recreation. Okay, some people have that gifted ability. During work itself, they'll be lively, they'll be cheerful, they'll be joking. Okay, they'll be sharing forwarding message, they will be discussing with each other, and they'll be chit chatting. Okay, so that's also fine, as long as it does not affect the work. Sometimes the recreational activities involve physical activities, which is like walking to a temple, going and coming, or playing sports, which may be affected by the symptoms, so which is also a concern for the patient. Your rehabilitation will also target occupational or recreational. Okay, and you might involve the family, or you might give counseling on the habits or substance abuse, depending upon the different aspects of the history. Okay, so there we are. Once with the recreational history, once we have completed, we are almost through with the holistic aspect of the history taking, where we focused first on the non-organic symptoms, next on the red flags, next on the mechanical versus non-mechanical, and of course when we come into further picture, definitely the history taking will focus on articular, myofascial and neural. Okay, and in that the relationship with there are key identifiers for mechanism based reasoning. In that, what you see is, if the patient's symptoms are related to stress and relieved with relaxation methods, you might think of sympathetically maintained pain. Okay, and if the patient's symptoms are throughout the night and disproportionate symptoms all around the body, and it is relieved when the mind is occupied. Okay, they are learning a new language, or they are playing some kind of a games and all that, or how homemaker who is cooking, no pain, after cooking severe pain, central sensitization. Okay, so you get the clues, and then next you see that the top to down radiation of symptoms, or numbness, tingling, you have this sensory problem, all these things. You think about peripheral sensitization mechanism. And we have seen about the early morning symptoms and evening symptoms and night symptoms. That is the nociceptive mechanisms. So mechanism based reasoning could again be evaluated at the history taking level itself. So remember, you get a broad picture, overall picture history taking, and we know, as medical, we don't like the word history. Okay, frankly speaking, I'll tell you, physiotherapy. Do you know the history of Indian physiotherapy? How it started? Who are the pioneers who developed various milestones of physiotherapy development in India? If you don't know the history, that means the development is only automatic and it is spontaneous. Okay, development is not done by the people. Okay, so it's a very, very shameful situation that if you don't know the history of the profession. Okay, history of medicine is there. Okay, history of physiotherapy globally is there. So same way, history is something which gives how it started and how it progressed and how it is evolved. Okay, so it's very, very important to know history of everything. Okay, if you want to know a person, means you have to know the history. Okay, so don't think that history means it's about the kings, queens, ancient civilizations. So it's very boring. History means boring. Okay, we develop that attitude, okay, right from schooling days. So don't extend that into the history taking of the patient. So open-mindedness, active listening, okay, and of course combination of good interactive communication skills, which verbal and non-verbal, that is the body language, and a bit of humanity, I think will make you a better clinician rather than a better technician to administer the techniques of examination or techniques of treatment, rather than what is most important is handling of the patient, okay, emotionally, verbally, and professionally. Okay, so all these webinars are interactive webinars, so I always open the sessions for questions, so please go ahead with putting your questions, comments. I'm really honored to have Professor P.S. Jagannathan sir, Professor Emeritus. I think sir is a great pioneer in the field of physiology, who worked in Manipal University for more than I think 25 years. Okay, so it's a great service which sir has done as a teacher. Okay, he has taught many physiotherapy students in Manipal University. It's a pleasure to have Dr. Jagannathan sir attending us live. Of course, Dr. Pratima and Dr. Paramita, who are senior AOMPT members. Pratima, she is vice president of the AOMPT. She could get time early morning before her fitness workout, so she could attend today. Okay, so please put your questions. Okay, we have Senthil Sadaya Pillai, Dr. Lipika Bora, Nishant Srivastava. Okay, again they are members. Pritika Rana is also AOMPT member. So please put your questions if you have anything about history taking. Okay, every disorder has a specific key point in history taking. Okay, so it's not just that pain means it is pain because of multiple disorders. Okay, the difference in the pain and its behavior or the progression itself will tell that which disorder it could be. Okay, if the patient do not remember the history, definitely you will go to subjective examination. Okay, and if the patient do not want to give the history, then you cannot force it. Okay, patient's consent is very, very important. Okay, and if the patient gives contradicting history, that happens in psychosomatic disorders. Okay, so their memory will be very poor. They can't tell the same history every time. Okay, because they have created the disorder in the brain first. So you need to be very clear about that. Okay. So are we ready to wind up? Okay, the webinar number 23, history taking in musculoskeletal and manual medicine and therapy. So we will continue with the series and we'll have more exciting sessions. I also welcome you to put more queries. Okay, I was just explaining, I am just talking because I am always so fond of talking. Okay, because I have listened to people, so many people I have listened all my life. So I feel that I should share my information with everybody. So it's always good that we all prepare ourselves for next level of milestones, and achievements happen as our destiny automatically when our preparations are part of our karma. Okay, so we do the preparations as a part of regular process, then success is a daily happening and achievement is just a reflection, okay, in the mirror. So good luck to you all, and I really appreciate your early participation in the early morning. Okay, and we have more cheerful news coming up from the AOMPT, including the establishment of a new center of manual therapy education and training. We are having an exclusive center here at Bangalore, where the workshops and certification courses will be conducted directly under the supervision of the chief instructor, myself. Okay, so we are going to have batches of weekend batches. We are going to have evening batches which will suit the students who are attending in the colleges in Bangalore. It will be helpful. Weekend batches will be helpful for outstation candidates, and also clinicians who are having clinics Monday to Friday. They can't attend workshops or anything. Saturday, Sunday they can attend these courses. All courses of AOMPT are conducted here in the Center of Manual Therapy Education. Will be streamed live for people who can register, and they can watch it online also. Okay, so they can get the videos, they can get the same certificate, and they can get the same knowledge, absolutely full coverage. Okay, so this is the revolution that we are going to aim and in 2021. So the first one is the certification in spinal manual therapy. This spinal manual therapy CSMT course, where you are identified as a certified spinal manual therapist from the AOMPT. 6 days course, 50 credit hours, Saturday, Sunday, beginning from 13th February. Okay, so do not miss that. I really I'm excited to establish the new center very shortly. You will get the pictures and photographs in another 10 days time. Okay, so make sure that we are all part of the process where we make a new world, okay, with everyone smiling at each other and everyone helping each other out, and developing a better humanity. Okay, because post COVID we need this. Okay, yes, of course, the late question, do we have to take psychological history? Remember that first you have to know the person, then you have to know the disorder. To know the person, you cannot know the person by the body. You have to know the person by the mind. Okay, if you want to know, for example, a good teacher, for example, okay, you want to know the teacher. That means you cannot just watch the teaching and see that the content of knowledge alone is the best teacher. No, the willingness to share the knowledge, that is the best teacher. Okay, I might have only 100 rupees, but I am giving 90 rupees to others. Okay, I am more rich. I am rich not because I am having, I am rich because I am giving more. Okay, so I become wealthy. Okay, not just rich, I am wealthy. The same way, I am not just knowledgeable, I am wise, the wisdom. Okay, that comes with sharing your knowledge. So another person might have 100 rupees, but they are giving only 10 rupees. Okay, so you know that they might be rich, but they are not wealthy. Okay, so that's the difference. When you know that willingness to share, that is a mental aspect, the mind. You can't eliminate a mind out of the anything. Okay, so don't separate that psychological history, musculoskeletal history, everything like that. You have to know the person. So first you ask about question about person. Okay, so good luck to you all. Enjoy the day, the Thursday. This weekend is going to be again packed with webinars, definitely. Okay, I'm going to take around at least 4 to 5 webinars every day, Saturday and Sunday. This Saturday, Sunday. Okay, I might start with early morning. I might take till afternoon, because I don't expect the internet connectivity to be good in the evenings or in the night. Okay, so see you again. Bye bye.